All right. So we are live in our Facebook group. I always have to double check because there's a little echo that happens. The system does not know to not have me on. See, there we go. So now we know we're live for sure. So good evening, everyone. We are back for another session this evening. It's one I can't help but be excited about because it features a guest speaker that I know you guys are going to, if you're not seeing it live, you're going to wish that you saw it live. And it's going to be very beneficial. It is very specific. It's probably that conversation you've been wanting to have and haven't had the person or the contact to have it, in terms of how to ensure your child is actually doing good in French immersion. Like how do you know, as a parent, you don't speak French more than likely, you want to make sure, hey, what questions do I ask? What should I be looking for? What even can I ask the teacher, right? So I want to make sure that you guys, okay, have that access. I want to make sure that you guys have that understanding, and then you're going to be able to ask questions. So I wanted to introduce to you today, we have our guest speaker. Her name is Shayna. And she's going to introduce herself a little bit, guys, but it is about you, as I shared, getting the right conversations going for your particular scenarios. Everyone has a different scenario with their child's French learning, but Shayna works as a French second language consultant, and you'll get to know what that means. But I'm so excited for you guys. Take some notes. And Shayna, welcome to our French tutor community.
Thank you so much. Merci infiniment. Before I start, I really want to thank you, Elise, for having me. I'm so excited to support all of you. And I just want to get started right away. So let me share my screen and I'll do my introductions. There we go. And of course, let's press share. Okay. So today's presentation, as you know, is called How to Ensure That Your Child is Excelling in the French Immersion Program. The former teacher in me and the current coordinator, if you will, loves to have an agenda. So if you're just curious as to how this is going to roll out, I'm going to start off with introducing myself, and then we're going to jump into some questions to ask your child's French teacher. And I'll explain that, why I say they're French teacher. And then I have some questions that you should ask your child. And then I'd love to take some time to talk about decoding report cards in Ontario, how to read them, what to look for. And then I'm going to provide some possible next steps, and then we'll wrap up with my conclusions and open up the floor to Q&A, like Elisa just said. This presentation, I've timed it, should be about 15 minutes, 20 if I go above and beyond, but I'm hoping to be mindful of your time, and that way we can have more time at the end. So this is a little bit of professional background, if you will. So again, my name is Shayna Batiste-Ishayemi, if you didn't hear. I'm actually the creator and founder of Faire Sens. It's actually a company that I created because I wanted to help parents, guardians, and caregivers better understand the French as a second language curriculum in Ontario. And I do that by way of consultations and assessments. And we'll talk about that later. But really, I'm a French as a second language consultant, okay? That's my role because I want to make sure you understand how it works. Now, that's my side job. I really just do love helping people in my spare time. In the day, I'm actually a bilingual career advisor and educator. I used to be a French and careers teacher. I've taught for a total of about 10 years, where I've supported many a student of diverse learning and linguistic backgrounds. I've worked in the Toronto District School Board, where I taught grade 7 and 8 French, and I've worked in the York Region District School Board, where I've taught grade 9 French, grade 10 careers, and supported many other students as well. Now, how was I able to do that? Where I actually have an honors bachelor's of arts in French studies. I got that at York. And during my third year, while doing my undergrad, I actually lived and studied in Grenoble. It's actually the south of France in the Rhône-Alpes region. I also have a bachelor's of education because I used to teach, which actually has a focus on French as a second language from University of Toronto, also known as OISE, Ontario Institute for Studies in Education. And lastly, because I love supporting the whole student, the whole person, I actually have a career strategist certification with a focus on career development and career planning. Because of course, you've all put yourself in French, you've all put your children in French immersion in the hopes of getting bilingual jobs and really just opening all these doors. And I can do both, right? So, as promised, some questions to ask your child's French teacher. So the first one I have here is, what diagnostic assessments did you use to assess my child at the beginning of the school year or term? Okay. And then a follow-up question would be, did they arrive at your class at the right grade level? Now that's a loaded question. Okay. So before I move on, if you're not sure what a diagnostic assessment means, that's literally what a teacher uses. It's also called a formative assessment, an assessment for learning. They have all different terms for it. It just means what a teacher decides to use at the beginning of the school year to figure out where all the students are at. So this could be, they could do quizzes, surveys, discussions. They could do a bit of everything. And that's why I'm asking you to ask the follow-up question. Well, then, did they arrive at your class at grade level? That's very important to ask because every child is different, as we know. Some might have an individual education plan, or also known as an IEP. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Some students just need additional support. Some students are fine on their own. But if they're starting in September in grade 7 French immersion, the teacher needs to make sure that the majority of the class has grasped the grade 6 curriculum for French immersion. So they need to do these diagnostic tests and they will have the answers for you. They have to have some sort of assessment. So this is important to ask, okay? Number 2, which language strand would you say my child excels in? This is very important because there are 4 strands in the French as a second language curriculum: reading, writing, speaking, and listening. So if you're asking them this, they should be able to say at least one of them. Maybe they can say they're actually really strong in multiple, okay? Now, it's important to note that for provincial report cards, they actually should have these strands included in the comments when they go to write about your child's abilities, okay? And we'll talk about report cards later. Number 3, how is my child meeting the specific expectations of the curriculum? This is another loaded question that only a teacher will understand what you're saying. So they might be a little bit taken off guard, but it's actually a great question to ask. It'll open up the dialogue, I promise you. But if you have no idea what I'm talking about, let's look at the next slide, okay? The former teacher in me loves a print screen, loves arrows. So stay with me here, okay? So on your right-hand side, what you're seeing is just a snapshot of the speaking strand for grade 4 French immersion, if I'm not mistaken. And all the curriculum is organized like this. They have overall expectations and specific expectations. This is also online. Anybody can look up curriculum documents. The problem is most people don't know how to read them. So I'm going to quickly explain them to you, okay? So just to let you know, teachers are technically only required to teach to the overall expectations. So if I have a class of 30 students, all I need to make sure is that they can do B1, B2, and B3, and I can determine that with whatever type of assessment I come up with. So I need to make sure they can speak to communicate, speak to interact, and have the ability to use intercultural understanding. But remember, there's reading, speaking, writing, and listening. So they have to do this for all strands. Now, they must teach to the overall expectations, but the specific ones actually act as a guide when they're trying to do assessment and evaluation. So you'll see the second arrow there, it says specific expectations. As a teacher, if I need to figure out, okay, well, how am I going to make sure these children can speak to communicate, they can use those prompts underneath, like, for example, using oral communication strategies. I'll leave it there. I just want you to understand when you're asking that question, what you're going to get back in return. I don't want you to ask and then be unsure. They would then look to this and be able to say, well, actually, your child knows how to use communication strategies, or they know how to use reading strategies, or they know how to use prompting questions. They're going to be detailed, and that's where they're going to be pulling that from, if done properly, okay? So now we're going to move on to questions to ask your child, because personally, I feel like it shouldn't just be a conversation with your child's teacher, but also with your child as well. Okay. Now, number one, what is your favorite subject being taught in French and why? I wrote this question this way on purpose, okay? As a reminder, as you know, in the French Immersion program, there are multiple subjects being taught in French. If you don't know what they are, I've written them here for you. So at least 2 subjects must be selected from the following: the arts, social studies in grades 1 to 6, or history and geography from grades 7 and 8, mathematics, science and technology, and health and physical education. This is taken directly from the curriculum document that's available to you online, okay? However, it depends on the school board and even the school when it comes to which classes they want to teach in French. This is important because if your child is in a school now, as they are, but you have to move at the end of the year or next year, do not expect the exact same program. It will be different. Unfortunately, I promise you that. Especially the same goes for public to Catholic. It's just how it goes. The curriculum document is a general guideline, and anybody and everyone can use it how they see fit. Okay. So I actually digressed. I apologize. So remember, you're asking them what's their favorite subject and why. That's being taught in French. Okay, so now that you know what subjects can be taught, when your child answers you, you won't be a little bit confused. But the why is really important because it'll let you know what they're doing at school, right? If they say, I actually really enjoy physical education because I get to help I get to help my teacher be a coach, or I can be an assistant. I get to give the instructions in French. It'll just let you know, where your child's at and if they're actually even enjoying what they're doing, if that makes sense. Number 2, what is your favorite French game? Can you explain to me how it works? This might seem like a weird question, but as a former teacher, I can tell you every class, every course, a teacher is using games just to keep the kids engaged, especially when they need to do their minds on or their hook or whatever they're calling it to get the class going, especially at the end when they're trying to consolidate their learning, there's always a game. But I said French game because you want to make sure that they're understanding their teachers when they're giving them instructions, which is why you're asking, can you explain to me how it works? Right? Maybe they'll even play it with you. Maybe you'll play it with them. But you want to see if they're having an understanding of the French language when you're asking this question, and maybe even the content of that class. And lastly, number 3, how often do your teachers speak in French? Now, this might sound like an attack on our teachers. It's actually not. I'm very much in solidarity with teachers, but it's important to ask because sometimes your child doesn't actually have a permanent French teacher in the class, and that might mean that they have a substitute teacher every day, a different one, or a different one every 10 days because the LTO, they didn't want it. That's a story for another day. You need to know what's going on because it's now November. And more importantly, you don't want to just send your child to school and then find out at the end of the year that their teacher spoke mostly in English. That's a disservice to them when they're trying to move on to their next grade. Okay. Now, if you have a child that just started French immersion, some boards, they start them as early as junior kindergarten now, with most doing grade 1. Some actually are starting in grade 2. Nevertheless, prompt younger children because they're so young. Maybe ask them, do your teachers only speak French in the mornings, afternoons, all day? It gives you, it helps them to better answer the question. And then again, gives you a better understanding of what their full day looks like. Some school boards do not introduce English at all until grade 3 or even 4. It's just all French. And some it's 50-50. It's very different because again, every board can interpret the document how they see fit. So this question will help you understand what your child's doing at school, language-wise. So now I would love to talk about decoding report cards. And I say in Ontario because I know we have some guardians that are across Canada. Every province has their own Ministry of Education, so I can only speak to the one in Ontario. So when looking at your child's progress report card, which is distributed in November, you actually should have already received it, or you might be getting it this week, okay? Maybe next if they're a little bit behind, but it's coming out. Or the provincial report card, there's always 2. One is distributed in February and the other is distributed in June. Regardless of the report card you're looking at, in addition to their other courses, please do not forget to look at their French language mark. Okay, I repeat, the actual course called French. That's what you should be looking at, because that will determine their success in the French immersion program. Just because they're doing science in French, or science and technology, I already said that. If they're doing science or math in French, great, but they still need to be assessed on their reading, writing, listening, and speaking, like I had mentioned earlier, and those marks will actually let you know if they're successful when it just comes to the language piece. Okay? And again, when you're looking at those report cards, I'm also encouraging you to look at the subjects that are being taught in French. And in order to know what subjects are being taught in French, there's actually going to be a checkbox beside the word French, which can be found under or beside the respective subject. That sounds very wordy, and I promise you I didn't mean to make it sound confusing. So I have a print screen to explain that, because a lot of people don't know what that means. So here we're looking at a progress report card. It's a sample progress report card for a student in Ontario. Okay, again, I love arrows, so you'll see there's an arrow pointing to the word French, but the word French comes up multiple times. I'm just trying to show you that if this child was taking science and technology in French, there would be an X in that box. That's how you know which classes your child is taking in French, okay? Also a note, other boxes like ESL or ELD are for students who are learning English as a second language or who are in the English development program. Okay, that's a whole other piece, but you can be in both. So if you ever see that box and maybe you didn't realize, or I don't know, just wanted to let you know that that's what that means, because there should be a conversation with your teacher if your child is in ESL or ELD. And then just a reminder, there are no letter grades for this report card. So if you haven't seen this report card yet, maybe you want to ask your child, or just send a quick email to the teacher. Maybe it went home, but it disappeared. I've had that happen quite often, but this is what it looks like. And they will be telling you if your child's progressing with difficulty, progressing well, or progressing very well, okay? This is a sample provincial report card. So remember, this one goes out in February and again in June. Note your child will actually get a mark for the first and second term. That's why they have 2 boxes. Okay. The IEP box is for a child, like I had said before, who has an individual education plan, IEP, on file, and they could have a modifications in place or accommodations. It's really important to know the difference. I'll quickly explain them. A child who has modifications in place means that they're not at grade level, which is why I had worded that question the way that I did at the beginning of this presentation, meaning they might be in grade 7 right now, but they're performing at grade 3 level or grade 4 level. Any other level except grade 7. That's called a modified IEP. And the comments in the box on the right, so that open white space, should actually start off with a modifier saying these comments are modified, blah, blah, blah. That is what that means. If your child is being accommodated, it just means they're in grade 7 and they just need additional supports so they can be successful in grade 7 because they're at their grade level with their peers. Okay, so the IEP box will be checked off regardless of modifications or accommodations, but you should look into that if you're not sure if your child has one. So here are some possible next steps, okay? After having talked with your child's French teacher, having talked with your child, and after reviewing your child's report cards, if you still feel like you need additional support or even a second opinion, I would strongly recommend booking an AFSL, in-person assessment with Versance, okay? And what does that mean? Well, by booking an in-person assessment, I, French as a second language consultant, I will actually assess your child based on the grammatical concepts outlined in the Ontario French as a second language curriculum, okay, for their FSL program and their grade. So if they're in French immersion, grade 8, I will do an assessment based on everything that they're supposed to be able to achieve grammatically in that grade. And I'll do that by conducting a speaking reading and writing test. I will give you the results for each test and even provide you a rubric that highlights the results. Okay, then I'll discuss the results during a post discussion, 30 minutes, and then provide you a list of possible next steps, including whether your child should actually remain in the French immersion program. My goal is not to say, take them out, but there's a full service package here where you can kind of look at everything to make sure they're in the right program. Now, our assessments currently are for the Peel, Toronto, and York regions in Ontario. You can also just stay connected with us and follow us on social media, right? Maybe you don't need that. Maybe you don't need that second opinion. Maybe your child is thriving and all is well. But our website acts as a resource. You can email me if you have any follow-up questions. Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. The slides will be available, made available to you afterwards. You just have to click the links, and everything will go. Everything is linked accordingly. Okay, on our social media platforms, you'll have videos, short videos about all the things that I teach about when it comes to the French immersion program. Now, I do want to conclude by saying the French immersion program is a great opportunity with many advantages. Okay, I'm not here to say otherwise. I just want to remind you that it's extremely important, however, to re-evaluate your child's situation every single year when they're in elementary school, especially after grade 4, because the program becomes way more intense. Okay, so if they were breezing through, grade 1 to grade 3, or maybe even junior kindergarten to grade 3, I'm excited. I'm happy to hear that. But it takes a turn because that's when they start introducing English in most school boards, and there's a shift. Okay, and for additional support, you can check out our resources section on our website. I've got plenty of free French as a second language resources that are free, paid, and for different age groups. That's it for me. Do you have any questions? I mean, because, thank you for listening. I do see some in the chat, but I'm going to pass it on to Elise. I'm not sure if you've got a system in place here.
Guys, it's just me. It's just us. And we want to thank Shayna. That was an amazing presentation. I know I said take notes. I meant it. I mean, sometimes it is helpful just to have someone break down things like report cards. Some of you on the call, we chatted offline about what those are, what it means, how you should take it and act accordingly. So don't be shy. Feel free to unmute, guys, and ask Shane anything. This is your direct line to someone in the system and who can help you navigate a little better. Okay, so we have, it's Ovo, Nathan's mom. Yeah?
Yeah, hi.
Go ahead. Hi.
So you mentioned things start to get more harder from grade 4. Could you provide a bit more detail about that? Like, what changes in grade 4? I think I've heard that in different places that grade 4 things gets a bit more serious, it gets harder, but what does that really mean?
So great question. So I'm going to say in most boards, because I literally support so many and they all have different starting points and what have you. But I say grade 4 because that is when they start introducing the language curriculum. It's actually called language, and that's when they learn English. Now, because you put them in French immersion, the goal is that, of course, that they were immersed in French for most of their time, most of their subjects, but now they need to learn English. So just because you speak English at home or they speak with their friends, family, they hear it on TV, what have you, it's not the same as academic English. So now the teacher, could be their homeroom teacher or somebody else, has to then do the exact same thing they do for French, but for English. So there's reading, writing, listening, and speaking that they need to assess. They need to start teaching them. So a lot, like for example, in the Toronto District School Board in grade 4, they start reading books as a means to introduce English. But it becomes harder because now your child, that's where that bilingual piece is starting to come in. They need to start thinking in both languages actively, start doing their work in different languages, being assessed on their ability to do both. And some students find it difficult because they didn't quite master what they learned in the French immersion program to that point, and now they're being thrown into this different context of academia, if that makes sense. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did.
Okay. And also I should add that the French immersion part of their learning gets harder by grade 4, just like even in English, right? Math just starts to get really complicated. The science starts to get really complicated. So therefore, the terminology starts to become really complicated in French, in addition to what they're learning, beginning to learn in English.
Okay. I get that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sorry, I should have added that, right? That's really, it becomes complicated on both sides.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? If you can't unmute, guys, feel free to also write in the chat any questions you may have. You know what I want to ask? I also want to ask, I know sometimes parents, and Shayna, you can expand on it, but a lot of parents seeing the progressing with difficulty is literally crushing. It is, I know it's very common lately, unfortunately, across the board, but can you just speak to how should we be interpreting that progressing with difficulty
Great question.
And yeah,
Let me
what do
go
we
back
do with
to
that?
it. That's a great question. Thank you. I think I had it. Sure. Here's one. That's a great question, because even when they go to high school, they're going to have a progress report card as well in November that'll have a similar breakdown, but they'll use they'll use numbers instead. So as I had said, a teacher will start off with diagnostic assessments or formative assessments, also known as assessments for learning. And as time goes on, they start introducing a unit, right? Unit 1, and they make up the unit, they decide what they want, because remember, they're all just trying to teach to the overall expectation. So every teacher is going to figure out their own way to get there. They give an assignment, they give a test, they give a project, whatever they've done, they've marked it and it's come back, but your child didn't really follow the rubric for that one assignment or multiple. So over a while now, it's been 3 months, and they keep getting evidence. That's what they're going to call it, evidence from their assessment and evaluation that they're not meeting the criteria of the project, which is important, which is why I always say read the instructions, read the rubric. If the teacher gives you time to work on it in class, or they offer after school tutoring, like your child has to really dive in, because when they finally say, okay, they're progressing with difficulty, it's probably because they've been getting 50s in the assignments or the assessments that they were giving, or less, or maybe they've been getting 60s, or it's a mix. So they can't put grades, but in the behind the scenes, the teachers have grades for your child. Progressing very well can pretty much be a student that has like an A and above. Progressing well, B. Progressing with difficulty, C and under. But don't quote me, because every teacher has their own way to mark, right? But that's what that means. They have enough evidence to this point where your child is progressing with difficulty because they're not meeting the expectations of the assessments that they've provided. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. And I think you helped equip a lot of the parents, because I think that's usually the issue, like, what do I ask the teacher? So I think one of the prompts we're asking them, where does my child fit in relation to the class? Because I know progressing with difficulty can be alarming, can be very off-putting. If you speak to the teacher and, oh my goodness, okay, so most of the class is progressing with difficulty, great.
Well, that's exactly
right.
right. And I should have said, because I forgot, when they do a diagnostic assessment at the beginning, everyone has to, all their teachers have to. I mean, it doesn't make sense to start the class otherwise. That's because we have so many students coming from so many different academic backgrounds. They could have transferred from a different school. They could have just started, 2 months into the class after everybody else. They went from public to Cal. It doesn't really matter, but everyone learns French in a different way. Okay, I repeat, everyone learns French in a different way. And I'm not talking about how your child interprets it. I'm talking about how it's being taught. So when they come to the class, right, you could have half the class came from that feeder school where they had that teacher for 4 years and she was this, that, and the other, fantastic, or wasn't, but everyone has a different entry point, so they have to check in. But the diagnostic is done in September. By the time they're telling you that they're progressing with difficulty in November, September, October, I'll say they've had 2.5 months to do various assessments and evaluations and has the evidence to say, yeah, they need additional support.
Anybody else?
Feel free to ask. I raised my hand. I don't know
Oh,
if
sorry.
Is it
You-
Patience? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Patience.
Okay, thank you so much, Shayna. I learned a lot from your session. We are in Montreal, Quebec, and
Okay.
the reports are quite a bit different because my son is in the English Montreal School Board, but he's taking French as a second language. So he does the French language and science and technology, geography, ethic and culture in French. And he started that program in grade 4. He's now in grade 5. So he has never been in French immersion. Grade 4 was the first time he had to start doing that. And that's one of the reasons why I had to enroll with Elise, the French tutor, because I know that definitely he is not in the grade level like other kids who have started French immersion, maybe from grade 1 or something. So, and on their report sheet, they don't indicate all the things that you've explained. So I really don't know where to place him because when I look at his scores, his subject marks are actually like above the group average. So I'm not really able to, but I know he's not confident with speaking French. And most times he translates most of the words when he's giving like a project in French from school. He used Google Translate and all that too. So he's still trying to learn and understand how the whole thing works. So I really don't know how do I really know how to assess him and what to do next.
Perfect. That's a great question. And thank you for giving me this context because again, I only can speak to what we do in Ontario because I'm an Ontario certified teacher. However, it doesn't mean you can't ask for follow-up questions, right? So from what I gathered, he's in an English school board and is taking French plus another couple of courses in French. This brings me back to, where did I say? This brings me back to this point of the presentation. Do not forget to look at the French language mark. So there should be a mark for French as a course. I'm not sure if you can see it in this picture here.
Yes,
again,
there is. Yes, there is.
So you see in this picture here, again, Ontario, but it says French. They have core, immersion, and extended. That's what we have in our province. And they would have checked off immersion because that's what they're in. It doesn't matter. Look for that subject and what are the marks, right? What are they saying? Can he speak? Can he read? Can he write? Can he listen? Because that's what I harp on, because you have students doing well in French, but they can't speak. It's because it's only one part of the language, or they're doing well and they can't write. You get the point. So I would follow up and again ask, which strand is my child successful in currently? Regardless of how they do their report cards or how their curriculum is done, a language teacher should be able to answer that question. And where I know what Elise focuses on is that reading comprehension. And I'm so glad to have met her and collaborated, because you literally have to be able to read in order to succeed in anything else when it comes to language, because you can't read your science homework in French. If you can't, sorry, then you don't understand, right? So if he's doing above and beyond, that's great, but dig a little deeper and ask about the strengths in which strand and the weaknesses, okay? And maybe even ask if you can see a copy of his work. I know you can't read it in French, but I don't know, ask for some samples. What does the level 4 look like? Or what does an A look like compared to my child? And lastly, we have parent-teacher interviews around report card time. I'm not sure what they do in Montreal, but in addition to the report card is just the beginning of the conversation. Even if your child's doing well, always meet with the teacher in person, because they can't talk to you in detail on the report card. They're literally just comments that they've had to write out and sometimes copy and paste depending on the situation. Does that help you in any way, Patience?
Yes, it does, Shayna. Thank you so much. I
You're very
appreciate it.
welcome.
We already had our parents-teacher interviews. I wish this session was before that time, but I was able
That's
to ask
okay.
some questions. Yeah, I understand. I can
Okay.
always meet with my child's teacher.
Oh yeah, you can. One thing about us teachers, we love to talk about how our students are doing. They wouldn't mind a follow-up, a meeting, a virtual conversation, a phone call. You can ask as many times.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have Carla. Sorry, Shane, I'm calling the parents because they're under their kids' names and I'm just
Of
used to
course.
seeing that. So
No,
Carla,
I can't
you're
see
next.
anything. No worries.
Carla, then Ovo.
Hi, good night. I really
night.
enjoyed your presentation, so thank you
Well,
for
thank
that.
you.
So I already had my meeting with my child's teacher.
Okay.
And so I was wondering, because you just said it just now. So my question was, can I follow up and ask these same questions you had in your presentation to her? Because like
Absolutely.
for my kids' report card, she got progressing with difficulty.
Mm.
But I know that when she got her at the end of last year, her teacher said she was at grade level, but now in this grade, she's not doing well. So it's just a big
Yes.
difference.
Absolutely. And may I ask, is your child in the same school?
Yeah,
Same
she's in the
school?
same
Okay.
school. Yeah.
Okay. And this is one thing, and again, I'm never going to speak ill of a teacher because I know exactly what they have to go through. However, the curriculum document is written in such a way that, like I said, it can be interpreted however one wants to interpret it. So I'm just going to go back to it, right? So again, this is just one page. It's like a 140-page document, but don't be overwhelmed. Google French as a second language document, document, have it saved on your computer, have it saved on your phone, because when you start to have these conversations again, you're going to feel so much more empowered and armed when you're asking these questions. So the end of the last school year, the teacher might have very well said, absolutely, they're meeting curriculum expectations because based off of the assessments they created. Remember, every teacher makes up their own assessments unless they are told to all follow the same like guidelines. And I taught in elementary school. Elementary teachers are their own island. They do their own thing. Everyone does their own thing, okay? However, how many assessments did that teacher give? The one from the previous year. Sometimes the year is so chaotic, teachers will just pull from their best 5 assessments to give a mark. Some other teachers will pull from their best 10. That already changes the entire dynamics of a situation for a class, let alone a student. Now, the new teacher coming in might be the one that's doing every single specific expectation. See how it says B1.1? Every page has at least up to 1.6 for every strand, for every category. So if this current teacher is saying, all right, B1.1, so-and-so cannot use oral communication strategies, B1.2, they can't, like, now the mark is going to be different. It's all subjective, even though they're using the same document. This is why I would encourage you to ask those follow-ups, because they should be able to tell you what they're using to assess your child. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yes,
okay, great. And no problem. And don't be afraid to just send a quick email saying, oh my goodness, it was so good to see you at parent teacher interviews, but I had some follow-up questions, and just put it in an email. It's probably easier for them because then they can take the time, read the email. They might be a little stressed, I'll be honest with you, Carla, but then they can take the time and write out the response, or just say, you know what, Carla, can I just pop on the phone with you? And they'll respond. They have to. And if they don't, that's when you copy admin. Good day.
Thank you.
No problem.
Hi, Shannon. So you mentioned about checking their work and maybe trying to get a copy of what good looks like. So that's something I struggle with. So when my son has homework or assignments, it's hard to tell if that is good, if that is not great, if it's correct, if it's wrong. I really just don't know. I can try and Google translate it, but even I think he's probably better at stitching together different words than Google Translate. Google Translate is not right.
No, it's not good. No. Yes.
So,
okay.
Like being able to like check that way to know, okay, is what I'm hearing at school aligning with what I'm seeing at home? I do not know how to do that.
Very good question. Thank you for asking. Now, I'm going to give a suggestion, but it might not work because every teacher does things their own way. I always say, start with the assignment rubric. I repeat, the assignment rubric, because the instructions might be in French and maybe even the rubric, but the rubric is what the teacher spent so much time creating to explain how to get the highest mark. And students seem to always forget this because we have to put it with a level 4, 3, 2, 1, or R, or they go backwards, R, level 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's what they use in elementary school, okay? And it's written right there. So R means they're not meeting expectations at all. Level 1 means 50 to 59, 2, 60 to 69, 3, 70 to 79, 4 is 80 and up. So you're gonna want to sit with your child and say, all right, let's bring up this assignment, show me the rubric, okay? Now, if the rubric is in French, fine. But then have that translated. If it's digitally, just run it through the translator anyway, because then you know that your child will get a level 4 under this section, which is knowledge. Okay, it's called the KTCA, knowledge, thinking, communication, and application. Again, it's so complicated to explain because it actually is very confusing, unfortunately. But I promise you, the rubric will be divided in under knowledge, thinking, communication, application. Sometimes they have all 4, sometimes they only have a few because it depends on what they're assessing, but then they'll tell you how to get that level 4. Now, if that's too much or you still aren't sure, okay, you can always ask your child, well, did your teacher give you a sample of what you're supposed to be working on? Sometimes kids say no, but the answer is yes. And that's where I would actually overstep your child and send a quick email, not the day before the assignment's due, because some students procrastinate, but maybe a week before if you're finding that you're having a roadblock. You know what? We've been trying to work on this assignment. Do you have any samples of level 4 work, or do you have any pieces whereby the student has met the expectations, right? And it's not because you're trying to copy, because they have the example, right? They shouldn't be worried about that. But then you can see for yourself what it's supposed to look like. Does that make sense? Because I kind of gave a couple of options there.
Sorry. Yes, it does.
Okay, and I can repeat myself because again, trust me, it's so layered. There's so much involved with assessment and evaluation. So if I need to explain something again, I don't mind.
I think it does. So what
Okay.
is 2 things. So one, there should be an assignment rubric. So that's like a starting point of what could give me a sense of what good looks like, and trying to compare it to what it has, or also trying to get a sample from the teacher to say,
yes,
this sample already meets this level of what good looks like, and then I can compare it to what he's doing.
Correct. And it's a second option because be prepared. The teacher might say, no, we don't offer samples, because I know in high school, they stopped giving samples to a certain point because students were copying and just giving the same stuff. But I don't think that's what the teacher should be worried at this point when you're asking these very specific questions to support your child. If they don't have it though, you have to be prepared for that answer because they might just don't have samples. But the rubric, I spent many an hour making rubrics, trust me, that is the starting point for sure.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else want to squeeze in their question? This is literally the ask anything opportunity. We're okay. All right. So if we're good, we just want to thank Shayna for I personally selfishly enjoyed this session. I thought it was great. Hopefully I know you guys thought it was great as well. We have our entire Facebook community as well. Over 1,100 people will see this presentation. People are already asking me live. Oh, someone asked a question in the Facebook group. Do you want to?
Oh, of course.
Maybe like 1 minute ago. Okay. So they were just asking, you know, parent-teacher interview was only 10 minutes. Is that normal?
It sure is. I'm sorry to say, but people don't realize, and maybe I should say people don't realize, we all have jobs. We all have to take the time out to rush home, feed our children, rush to the school. It's chaotic. But teachers have multiple sections to teach if they're the homeroom teacher. When I used to teach, I would have upwards to 250 students. I repeat, as an elementary school teacher, I had upwards to 250 students because I was the grade 8 French teacher for the entire school.
Wow.
And when they have parent-teacher interviews, usually runs from like 6 to 8 or 7 to 9 if they're gracious, because they have to go back to work the next day. They have to be equitable and make sure that there's a slot for potentially whomever wants to come in. And even the 10 minutes won't allow me to see all 250 parents and guardians. And I just don't understand. There's no way to fix that. But that's where this open dialogue comes in. Parent-teacher interviews is the beginning. It doesn't mean you can't follow up like I've suggested, or just have a healthy email correspondence. Teachers love that. Your children will hate it, but they love that. So if you couldn't get it all in 10 minutes, they actually will be very happy to communicate with you via email or phone. And it is normal. Unfortunately, there's just no way to give more time.
Okay, hopefully that addressed to our parent who asked in the group, and we may get some follow-up questions after people watch the replay. Like I said, the parents who couldn't come live, I know this will be the one where they're like, oh, I wish. They always say they wish, but okay. So the person speaking to me on Facebook, yes, so the Zoom room that we're in, this one was for parents already. Their kids are currently in our programs.
Oh.
We will open up, maybe Shayna will come back. Shayna will come
I
back.
would
We'll
love
invite
to.
everyone. We'll invite everyone. We wanted to kind of keep for our active parents in our community, because we do know they had some really pressing questions following report cards, and we're kind of working hand in hand, right? Like, what do I ask? But then we're also doing programming for them that we integrate based on what we know our French immersion and full French students need. So that brings us to a wrap. This was really good, Shayna, honestly.
I'm so happy. This is
so
what
much.
I do. Thank you for having me. And if as the questions come through after release, don't hesitate to copy and paste them or put them in one email, and I will sit and reply to all of them. Or you can simply respond to everyone with my email address. And again, I will reply to them. I will reply. I love supporting. I'm very much an advocate about learning French. It doesn't matter how, right? So I'm here to help.
It's awesome. And guys, Shayna will send me, well, I will get her permission to send you guys her email address, her social media and website. So if you guys wanted to just let things sink in a little bit more, you're going to have an opportunity to do that. So look out in your emails for that follow-up. And I hope you guys will be at our next session. Okay, we'll have one probably in a couple of weeks, another topic. But once again, thanks for hanging out.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Merci.
everyone.
Bonjour.
Have a good
Bonne
evening.
soirée.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.